Western Australia, an environment that has, over time, evolved some extraordinarily unique groups of Homo sapiens. But today, we observe a small tribe akin to a group of meerkats that gather together atop a small mound to watch, question, and discuss the current events of their city, their country, and their world at large. Let's listen keenly and observe this group fondly known as the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Welcome back, dear listener. Yes, another episode 407 of the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove. Currently just two meerkats, myself and Joe, expecting a third meerkat in the shape of Scott to come in at some point, but he's been having trouble connecting. So Joe has put his tech guy hat on rather than his UK correspondent hat and is busily trying to fix Scott's problem. In the meantime, Joe, just to prove you can double task, how are you? All going well?
I'm up in Coventry at the moment, but staying with a friend, and we're doing a lightning tour of many towns in the UK, seeing other friends that I met during the pandemic on various video calls.
Yeah.
So it's been great catching up with lots of people, and that sounds like Scott joining us. It was great. You talk to somebody over a video call once a week for 2.5, 3 years, and it's lovely to finally see them and catch up.
And you look at them and say, "You're much shorter than I thought you'd be," or anything like that?
Actually, we met someone last night, and my friend I'm staying with went, "Oh, you're much shorter than I thought you would be."
Right.
But usually it's sort of only this bit of the body we get to see, so you've no idea.
Yeah. It looks like Scott's with us. Scott, are you with us?
I'm here. I can
Excellent.
hear you and everything like that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Bring the microphone a little bit closer, maybe, or not. In the middle of dinner, Scott, you're also
I'm in the middle of
multitasking.
dinner, yes.
Okay,
Anyway.
very good.
I'll wolf this down quickly and I'll put it to
Okay.
the side once we actually start filming.
All right. Well, we are filming. We're up and away, Scott.
Are we?
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Oh, shit.
7:34. We're 4 minutes into this podcast. So you keep going there. Well, I won't bring you in until I really need you. In the chat room, John is there, and also James. G'day, James. How are things going in Sydney? Right. Let's look at the agenda. What are we going to talk about? Well, I promised you last week something positive, didn't I? I was a bit over the sort of negativity of everything we've been doing. I thought, well, let's try and get some good news. And let's mute Scott, shall we? I'm going to mute him until he's gone. So I thought I'll try and look up some good news stories. And, I just Googled good news. And there's a whole range of websites. Like there's the Good News Network. The ABC has a good news category. So does Nine News. There's a Positive News Society. And even the BBC has like a good news topic category section. So a lot of these news sites, Joe.
And Gideon's has the good news.
Forgot about that one.
Yes.
So
I'm surprised that wasn't on your list of hits.
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. Maybe the algorithm has worked out that's
Right.
showing me Christians. Mind you, I do go to a lot of Christian sites. So
Yeah.
anyway, there are these good news sites out there when you just want some good news rather than, what's the latest in Gaza or other disasters around the world. And so the BBC was an interesting one. And I'm just looking at a screenshot of the first 16 articles on the BBC Good News category website. And of the first 16 articles, 4 of them, dear listener, are cat stories. Cat missing since March, found 60 miles away. That's the top good news story. Number 5, the cat that waits for train commuters. I assume it sits on a platform somewhere waiting for train commuters.
I was going to say, when I was at school, one of the lads who caught the bus with us, his cat used to wait at the end of the road every day for the bus to arrive, and looked forlorn the day that he wasn't on the bus. So I picked it up and carried it down. It used to get up on his shoulder and walk back with him.
There you go.
So there
It
you
would have
go.
made the BBC News because at
Probably.
number 15, missing cat found 140 miles from home, as opposed to the other one, which was only 60 miles. And bronze medallion to Sainsbury social media cat. This is the calibre of good news story that is out there, dear listener. What were some of the other stories? Lorry driver thanks wife after his breast cancer. Beavers saved from drowning in storm drain. Oh, here's a good one. Naomi Campbell, the famous model. She's been honoured by Cambridge College. And there's a guy here who's nearly 80, Jimmy Cooper, and he's still working as a nurse. It's slim pickings, dear listener, on the good news front. I'm just going to have to revert back to sad news because I can't delve into cat stories all day. Yeah, there we go. Watley sent a message during the week. He said the stock market is in the toilet, and he thought that was good news. The stock market going down. Maybe it is for our economy.
It is if you shorted those stocks.
Yes. Or just generally, if you're not in stocks, maybe it's good that some of these valuations become more realistic. Anyway, here's a good news story. Happy Recreation Day for people in northern Tasmania for back on yesterday. Because northern Tasmania get a day off called Recreation Day. It was legislated in 1991, probably because northern Tasmanians were sulking that Hobart got Regatta Day in February. So they're not celebrating anything in particular except having a Recreation Day. Well done, northern Tasmania.
Should be renamed Cocaine and Hookers Day, I think.
I think lots of Melbourne businesses close on a Monday before Melbourne Cup Day anyway because people get a long weekend. I know the business that I work for does that.
Yeah, lots of... in France, quite a lot of public holidays for some reason. I think fall on the Thursday from memory. And taking the Friday off is known as making the bridge.
What happens on the Thursday? What
I
is
think
it?
the public holiday falls on a Thursday, and so people will take the Friday off to make a long weekend.
Right.
And it's so common that there's actually a phrase in French called "making the bridge," which is where you bridge your day off and the weekend.
Yeah. It's a bit of an art form for people maximising their holidays and taking days off and all the rest of it. So,
Yes.
yeah. Anyway, there's a good news story. Northern Tasmanians managed to have a public holiday for no reason at all other than Hobart was getting one, so they got their own. Okay, back to sad news, bad news, or just news. Reserve Bank today, Joe, decided to raise interest rates 0.25% to 4.35%, which that, of course, forms the basis of housing loan rates.
If the ordinary people aren't hurting, then the economy's not doing well.
Yes. Well, the reason for it, of course, is that the Reserve Bank's mandate is to grab inflation by the balls and make sure it just doesn't happen. That's its own purpose, the Reserve Bank.
But it doesn't do that by stopping actual inflation. It does that by making poor people unemployed,
Yes,
so they don't have any money to spend.
with the bluntest of roundabout implements, the only implement it has, it decides, well, we'll just raise interest rates, which, of course, Joe, come into the calculation of inflation. So when you raise interest rates, you automatically raise inflation because it is part of the basket of goods that go into measuring inflation.
Well, yes.
They keep raising interest rates and going, why is this inflation going up? Well, the basket of goods includes interest as a component. Huh. But you consumers out there have got it too good. And that's why we're raising interest rates. Because you consumers out there insist
On buying things.
On buying things, and according to the laws of supply and demand, your demand is so high that you are forcing prices higher. Therefore, we must raise interest rates on your mortgages, which will cause you financial pain, so you'll stop buying stuff, and therefore the prices of things will go down.
Look, you
That's
poor
the
people,
theory.
stop buying food and clothes and start buying investments instead.
Is Scott back? No, he's still out.
No.
Okay, he's still missing. So the problem with all that is it's assuming that inflation is caused by consumers having too much money and spending too much on stuff and causing prices to increase. If only it were that simple. And, well, before we even get onto that, you know, the whole point of the Reserve Bank being independent of government and its sole mandate being inflation, and that the government not being able to do anything about it, is completely nuts. Like, the interest rates in our community are a really important thing. And to leave that up to an independent body who is told your sole mandate is to control inflation and fucking don't worry about the rest of the economy. Your only metric that we're going to measure you by is inflation, but we're going to put you in charge of interest rates, is just asking for trouble. So, it's such a critical part of running an economy that the government should just take control of that policy and not just leave it up to a bunch of unelected guys. Because the government's role in society is not only to look after inflation, but also look after unemployment levels, look after growth in the economy, look after the economy and the community as a whole, and therefore make decisions as to what's in the best interest of the overall Australian economy, not just one metric of, inflation. So it's a completely nuts situation that we're in. But even if the situation we were in made sense and you said, yeah, it's a good idea, let's put the Reserve Bank in charge of interest rates and let them look after inflation and that's their sole job. And, guess what? People are spending too much money, so you raise interest rates, they don't spend as much. It's because it's people spending money that causes prices to go up. According to Ian Verenda at the ABC, if only it were that simple. Our annual growth is sliding. Take away the effects of our massive population growth. Because, guys, there's a lot of immigration been happening. You aware of that?
All those filthy foreigners coming over here, taking our jobs.
Lots of them coming in.
It's not the filthy foreigners.
Apparently, a lot of them are nurses. I think the highest category of intake is nurses.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Because there was a meme I saw where Pauline Hanson was criticising the high immigration rate because it was putting pressure on our hospitals and lowering our wages. And the person was saying, well, the highest category of immigrant is actually nurses, which is going to help our health system and increase wages. But anyway, I've digressed. Take away the effects of our massive population growth, and you could argue we're in a recession. Household spending is waning. Building approvals are dropping. Saving buffers are in decline. And wages growth has remained well below inflation. As for inflation, it's been dropping. It's now 5.4%. A steady rate since last December's 7.8%. And many of the things that have helped push prices higher in the most recent September quarter were beyond the control of consumers. Rents have been soaring because of huge immigration program, while exorbitant lifts in power bills were pushed through during the quarter that will not be repeated in the next few quarters. So just remember that. Like, consumers don't, through overspending, put up the price of power bills. That's not how it works. Petrol prices also soared. Like, people just have to fill up a tank of petrol when they have to fill up a tank of petrol. Like, you just do what you have to do. And it's not because of excessive driving by Australians because they're feeling so well-to-do that petrol stations have decided, I reckon here's an opportunity to put up prices.
It's actually
they just put them up and
we
have to suck it up.
But look at the commuter car parks for the train stations,
Yes.
and see how busy they are. You can tell the cost of petrol by how many people are in a car park.
Can you?
You can. I'm not joking.
What, if it goes up 20 cents, the car park's got more people in it?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that. Well, I'm not a commuter like that, so there we go. So these are things beyond the control of consumers, and raising interest rates is not going to have an effect in that way. Scott, what do you think? You're back on board with us now. You finished your dinner. Your microphone's tuned on. I've had my rant about the Reserve Bank. Do you think they should there be a Reserve Bank holding control of interest rates with their only criteria being inflation, or should they?
No, it shouldn't be their only criteria. It shouldn't be their only criteria. The criteria was that they were to control inflation and also aim towards full employment. Now, their argument would be that we are at full employment right now, so inflation's the only boogeyman they've still got to slay. But they're using a very blunt instrument called interest rates to control inflation. Now, again, I found myself approving of what the Green member said, Max, whatever his name is. He was arguing for a super profits tax because, as he pointed out, Coles and Woolworths have both just reported super profits. At the same time, they were jacking their prices up. The banks have all reported super profits at the same time as interest rates have gone up. So his argument was that if you actually put if you put a super profits tax on these companies, then you'd have extra money that you could then funnel in to reduce the impact of inflation on households. Now, I'm not sure how he'd actually do that because you'd have to have it very heavily. What's the word I'm groping for? Not incentivized. Anyway, you'd only pay out those people that really genuinely needed it, rather than everyone. You'd have to.
Just move the microphone a fraction closer, please, Scott.
No worries. You'd have to pay it out to only those people that genuinely needed it, not everyone. So anyway.
Well, I don't think they have a mandate of looking after full employment. It doesn't seem to me that all you ever hear from them is inflation, and the whole.
I know.
The whole point of raising interest rates is to cause unemployment, to reduce demand for consumer items, to thereby lower prices. So,
which is one of those things. I think they have lost sight of their second and more important thing was to aim for full employment.
Anyway, that's the situation we're in, and we get situations like Government Services Minister Bill Shorten was asked about the Reserve Bank's upcoming decision on interest rates, and he acknowledged the Reserve Bank is independent of government but said, I hope it stays static. So we've got a government unable to do things, just looking on as a Reserve Bank says, well, we're going to raise interest rates, yet the government of the day seemingly can do nothing. Crazy.
Well,
in the lead,
it's one of those things. You've got the federal Labor government having just done a review of the capital expenditure budgets and that sort of stuff of governments, and they're actually threatening to delay or potentially kill off some of the projects and that sort of stuff that are up here, haven't they?
I don't know. I haven't read it. So some capital spending
Yes, and capital expenditure has been under the review microscope and that type of thing with the threat of them closing them down.
Oh, winding it back. Well, there's not enough money around. Once you've allocated nearly $400 billion to submarines, then there's nothing left. We'll be talking about submarines soon. Don't worry about that. Got some more stuff about submarines.
Submarines again.
Yeah, more stuff about that. Just in the lead up to this talk about interest rates, we had the IMF, International Monetary Fund, who with the World Bank have caused all sorts of problems around the world, particularly in the global south, in my favourite part of the world, South America and Central America. And they did a report on Australia, on the health of the Australia's economy prior to this interest rate rise. And they said that they called for sweeping policy reforms, including lower income taxes. Gosh, imagine that. International Monetary Fund calling for lower income taxes. A higher GST rate.
So punish the poor.
Yes. To help state governments replace stamp duty with annual property taxes.
That was one of the calls from that economist who was talking about basically unearned rent was what it was called.
So
that's something the Grattan Institute's been calling for too.
I'm pausing there because out of the three ideas so far, lower income taxes, higher GST rate, we've now moved into something that might actually make sense.
Yep.
Replacing stamp duty with an annual property tax, if it was high enough. The problem is, this IMF was talking about raising the GST rate to help state governments replace stamp duty with annual property taxes, meaning the new annual property tax would not be equal to the stamp duty. So they'd need a higher GST rate to make up the shortfall. Well, why not just make the new property tax sufficient to cover the lost stamp duty, would be what I'd say. Or even more, perhaps, and lower the GST rate. Anyway, and they also called for an economy-wide carbon price. That's what the IMF thinks we should do.
See, again, that's probably one of the few things that progressive people would be calling for. And actually, that makes sense. Yeah, you put a price on energy, put a price on carbon, and then use it to subsidise low-income households to make their properties more efficient. So they're using less energy.
In the chat room, Eric says, I like the IMF more when it was Tom Cruise and the Impossible Mission Force. Thanks, Eric. Possible Mission Force, right. Yeah, so that was the IMF and the Reserve Bank. Shall we move on to more positive topics like Gaza, perhaps?
Well, we could do.
Unfortunately, my daughter put me onto this guy, Sean King, who posts videos on Instagram of, I think he started when Black Lives Matter started, and so he gets a lot of social media videos, and he, of course, is just publishing lots of stuff coming out of the Gaza from people on the ground pulling, bodies out of the rubble. It is just appalling what is going on there. It is unbelievable that it's happening, and it seems like the Israelis are determined to commit one of the worst atrocities in human history, like a very knowing atrocity that they're committing here. The victims of a terrible atrocity, the Jews, are just engaged in something that's just going to go down in history as one of the worst.
It's not looking good, and it's probably what Hamas were hoping for. It's almost certainly the aim of their attacks was to draw a disproportionate response that was going to injure innocent people in the middle, caught in the crossfire.
I did read something that Hamas was pissed that Saudi Arabia was starting to cozy up to Israel in certain ways, and
and that's probably
generate,
what this.
In order to generate sympathy from their Arab neighbours, and this was one of the tactics as part of that. Possible? Yeah. So, as Caitlin Johnston says, it is the most 2020s thing in the world that there's an active genocide currently underway, and it's people who oppose it who are being called Nazis. I agree there. The sort of Orwellian doublespeak that is going on in our world over all sorts of issues just flabbergasts me.
But there's also been quite a lot of anti-Jew rhetoric. So it's not just Jews out of Israel. It has been kill all the Jews.
Yes.
There is no right side in this.
Nope.
No, there's not.
It's a mess.
They've got that those protesters and that sort of stuff. They're out the front of the opera house and that sort of stuff. That's held up signs saying "Gas all Jews."
Yes.
That sort of thing. Now that does nothing for their cause.
Mm.
Now their cause is quite just, but when they actually say stuff like that, no one's listening to them.
There's a guy called Mario Cavallo who wrote, wow, people hate me for this simple, straight question. Just answer it yes or no. If the bad guys who murdered your wife and kids were hiding in one of the apartments of a 30-storey apartment building with 500 people in it in your city, would you tell the police to blow up the entire building to get the bad guys? A similar analogy. He's got a point.
It is a very similar analogy. Yeah, he's got a very good point.
Yeah. Luckily for the entire region, Scott Morrison and Boris Johnson have landed on a bit of a tour. Haven't these people suffered enough, I ask you? ScoMo said...
Bojo and ScoMo are on a world tour, are they?
Yeah, they're in Israel. And just putting on flak jackets and helmets and wandering around handing out opinions. And guess what? They're kind of pro-Israeli. Funny that. ScoMo in particular, being Pentecostal, I'm sure, needs the rapture, needs Israel to be in charge of Jerusalem for his rapture purposes. I mean, it was under ScoMo that we decided that Jerusalem would be the Israeli capital or something like that. Yeah.
It was something that he planned on. He mooted moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I don't think he actually ever went through with it, but he certainly did raise it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think Trump did that at the same time.
Yeah, Trump did it before.
Yes.
Before ScoMo did.
All the evangelicals really, really want it. They want war in the Middle East.
I know they do. Yeah, they do.
Yes, and they want Israel winning, the Jews winning, so that they control Jerusalem. Is that somehow connected with the
return of Christ?
Coming?
Yes.
Yeah, the return of Christ, yes. Which sounds nuts, but it's so much of what's driving American thought on this whole thing. ScoMo said, do you provide a pause and a ceasefire to allow Hamas to regroup, to get themselves in a position to resist even further? I mean, this is the play from Hamas, and we've got to be careful not to be suckered into it. Meaning no ceasefire as far as ScoMo is concerned. And from his side of politics as well, James Patterson, Shadow Home Affairs Minister, argued against a ceasefire, saying Israel's removal of Hamas was a legitimate military objective. A ceasefire would just allow Hamas to regroup. And
I'd heard England and Australia had sent a clown show across to entertain everybody.
Yes.
with
Scott
ScoMo
Morrison.
Bojo.
Yes, ScoMo and Bojo. Yeah. What a mess. No resolution there. And Trump I came across some polling.
He
this
was in
is
trouble yesterday.
Yes, he's been in one of his court cases.
Yes.
This is the one where they are accusing him of overvaluing properties for getting loans
Yes.
and then undervaluing them when it came to paying tax.
That's it.
And I think it's the state of New York is saying that they want him banned from business in New York.
Yeah, they want to
And-
revoke his license, I think.
And the case is at the point where basically the judge has already found that he is guilty of doing that, and it's now just a matter of assessing what the penalty will be.
I
And
thought
they've-
it was they've assessed that the company did it, but they've not found out who in the company was responsible.
Ah, okay, that could be the case. Yeah. So the really weird part in this one is Trump has got it in for the judge's associate.
Yeah, he really went to town on her, didn't he? It was
So-
explained to me in a podcast I was listening to this afternoon. It was the Scathing Atheist or someone like that. They were saying that Trump had been gagged and that sort of stuff from leveling any sort of threats or complaints or anything like that. But he realised that his lawyers weren't actually gagged, so he got his lawyers to level the complaints about the judge's associate. And then the judge actually turned around and said, "No, you're all gagged now because this is ridiculous." So,
Yeah.
But also on
And-
the stand, apparently he was reined in for
Oh,
some of
yeah.
his- yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the exact language. It was beautiful legal language and that sort of stuff. But this judge really went to town on him. Yeah,
Yeah.
told him to shut his mouth.
So the
And then
judge's
he said-
associate, dear listener, is just the judge's assistant who is often just a recent graduate who's thinking one day they might become a barrister and is just sits next to the judge and hands them papers and stuff. Like they're not a participant in these things at all. But I think Trump found that this associate had been on social media, had appeared in some sort of anti-Trump rallies or something that indicated the associate was not a Trump fan, and that's been enough for him to go to town. But they're above a bailiff, but their influence on proceedings is zero, and he's just fixated by this associate.
Because he
Yeah.
knows he's going to lose the case, and he wants any possible. This was the only thing he could find to throw mud to pretend that it wasn't a valid case.
And the judge's gag order was a pretty good one, which basically said, okay, you can say I'm biased or things about me as a judge, I don't care, but you just can't attack the court staff like my associate or the bailiff or the prosecutors or their families, because when you start attacking them, your crazy people go and find out where they live and start
And kill them.
firebombing their cars. So it was a pretty well thought out gag order that really allowed him to complain about corruption in the court system if he wanted to, but just not to tackle
To make
Innocent.
it a personal thing, yes.
against people whose jobs are just fairly menial jobs in the whole system. So despite all that, still going unbelievably well. So I've got some stuff here from a CBS News poll, YouGov survey, and the margin of error on this is 3.3% on anything I'm about to tell you here. So people were asked, will you be financially better off, financially worse off, or stay about the same if Biden wins or if Trump wins and defeats him in an upcoming election? And 45% think they'll be better off if Trump wins. 18% think they'll be better off if Biden wins financially. And financially worse off, 48% if Biden wins, if Trump wins 32%, and about to stay the same to make up the difference. So essentially, there's a significant majority of people in America who think they will be financially better off if Donald Trump beats Biden in an upcoming presidential election. And in terms of the chances of the US being in a war, a substantial majority think it's more likely that the US will be in a war if Biden wins. I think they're right about that, actually. I mean, Trump previously wasn't disposed to using the military overseas. He wants to keep them in America so he can use them for himself as part of some insurrection type thing that might happen. And Israel, they felt that Biden would support Israel too much compared to Trump. And when it came to Russia and the Ukraine, if Biden wins, they think Biden will support the Ukraine over Russia. If Trump wins, they think Trump will support Russia over the Ukraine. And in the final one, the one that counts, choice for president, 48% Biden, 51% Trump. He is the favourite at the moment. Still, despite everything. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
I find that really bizarre.
We've been saying it for months, that all of these surveys are showing him in front.
Yeah, I know. It's just Joe Biden is too old. He is far too old to be still running, and Kamala Harris hasn't set the world on fire with her performance. So I don't know.
It's amazing. It
is one of those things that, it is one of those things that I hope that what's her name? The former vice president's daughter.
Former vice president.
Yeah, what was his name?
Mike Pence's daughter.
No, the former vice president under George W.
Cheney.
Was it Cheney?
Is that the one?
Anyway, whatever his name is, his daughter was booted out and that sort of stuff because she actually voted to impeach Donald Trump, and she went up against an absolute nutter from the right and that sort of stuff. Liz Cheney, thank you, Alison. I hope that she actually runs on her own ticket to split the Republican vote. Because that would actually. I really do hope that she runs, and she runs as hard as she can. She will lose, but I think that's one way that she could guarantee Donald Trump would never be president again, because that would split the Republican vote. It would give Biden a clean run. So anyway,
what a mess.
Here's Marianne Williamson.
Eric V is telling us. Yeah, it talks about Marianne Williamson. Anyone don't know who she is? Don't know. But there you go, a divided country, a lot of mixed up people. We're a divided country here. Just as an aside, one of the arguments in The Voice was Indigenous people know what's best for them. And I just think Australia voted in Scott Morrison. Did we know what was best for us at that time? 51% of Americans want to vote in Donald Trump. Do they know what's best for them at the time? People don't necessarily know what's best for them.
Well, no, but we're always better off under a right-wing politician than a left-wing politician, because they give us tax cuts, and that's the only thing that impacts our the money in our pocket.
Yes, yeah. Hey, we've got a new patron. Lloydberg signed up. I think Lloydberg might have been an old patron who's returned. I'm not sure. But thank you, Lloydberg, for signing up as a patron. It's easy to do, dear listener. Look at the show notes in your app and you'll see a link. And get onto Patreon and make a donation. That would be much appreciated. Now, I threatened to do this and talk about submarines because it's been a while. And if you were to do a word search on the show notes on this podcast, submarines would be one of the words that shows up the most. And I've got some more information about submarines. So this is from David Shoebridge, writing in the Saturday paper. And he says, Australia's Defence Force should be focused on defending Australia, not threatening our neighbours. This seems obvious, but is actually a contentious statement. Based on the conclusions of Australia's most recent Defence Strategic Review that adopts the goal of Australia being able to engage in impactful projection against countries to our far north. So our basic Defence Strategic Review is wrong because rather than focusing on defence of Australia, it wants to project impactfully to our far north. Anyway, at the centre of all this, of course, is the $368 billion AUKUS submarine deal to give us nuclear submarines and project our military force 4,000 kilometres north into the South China Sea. So that's not about protecting Australia. It's about threatening China. That's what these submarines are about. Now, even on its own terms, if that was a good idea, then the deal, the AUKUS submarine deal, even if you accept that it's a good idea to project power 4,000 kilometres away, this particular deal is such a dog of a deal, it's incredible. So he returned from a trip to Washington where he was talking with insiders, and they agreed that he could use the information but without quoting them. So he was in Washington speaking to leading experts under the Chatham House rules. You guys ever heard of the Chatham House rules before?
Yeah, where you go and you talk to them and that sort of stuff, but you can't actually say the exact quote or something like that outside of that?
You're free to use information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speaker may be revealed. So you can say what you heard, but you just can't say who told you.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So this is Shoebridge, David Shoebridge in America, talking to people. And we're going to squander our wealth. We're going to antagonise our neighbours. We're going to invite further escalation from China. And we're going to get a highly speculative and marginal military asset. And so we're supposedly acquiring 8 nuclear submarines. The first 3 to 5 of these submarines are meant to be Virginia-class submarines purchased from the US. The last 3 to 5 submarines that make up the 8-boat fleet will be AUKUS SSN nuclear submarines built in Adelaide from a yet-to-be-finalised British design. So that's the deal as we know it at the moment. 3 to 5 from the US, 3 to 5 UK-designed, Adelaide-built subs. So the ones that we're getting from the US are supposed to arrive in the 2030s, with the next 7 boats coming over the following 25 years. The problem is the US doesn't have enough subs. They're running short. They don't have enough, and they can't build them quick enough. So 5 submarines from the US represents about 10% of their total attack class submarine fleet. And while they've got plans to build 2 submarines a year, their current capacity is stretched at 1.2. So by the early 2030s, the US is going to be 20 boats short of its targeted fleet size. And that's supposedly at the time they're going to hand over to us
5 of
a
them.
few submarines. There's no way they're going to do it. And in order to do it, they would have to increase their production from 1.2 boats a year to 2.2 boats a year. But there is no plan or spending commitment to make this a reality. So there's a hazy commitment from us to give $3 billion to the US to help them with their shipbuilding. Anyway, it's not going to address the shortfall. So they're just not going to have the subs to give us. And in the 2030s, whoever's in charge, and we say, oh, we had this deal with Joe Biden back in early 2020s where we'd get these submarines and we'd like them now, please. Who knows who's in charge at that time is going to say, fuck off, we need these subs. You're not having them. And what do we do then?
It's going to be Donald
There we
Trump
go.
Jr.
Yeah,
Then we go cap
Trump.
in hand. Then we go cap in hand to the Japanese and say, "Well, will you provide us with 12 submarines at $1 billion each?" And they'll say, "Yes, we will."
We'll be going cap in hand to the Chinese, asking them for the subs at the rate we're going to be going. Bear in mind, US attack submarines currently requiring maintenance is almost double the historical average, running at about 37% of their fleet. These things are in the dock a lot of the time. That was that. Assuming against all odds the politics come good and the boats are delivered, what will be the military impact? Sometime in the 2040s, we might have, at most, maybe 5 Virginia-class nuclear submarines. The standard Virginia-class nuclear submarine has the capacity to carry up to 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles with a few torpedoes. Taking into account crew rotation, maintenance and transit times, even with a maximum fleet of 8 submarines, the best case scenario for 2054 will see 2 or 3 of those in the South China Sea at any time. So that's realistic. Even if we've got the whole contingent of 8 submarines, based on maintenance, crews, etc., maximum we'll have is 2 to 3 in the South China Sea.
Yep.
So what are we bringing to a conflict? 24 or maybe 36 Tomahawk missiles with 450 kilogram conventional warheads. Each such warhead is enough to destroy a moderate-sized building or potentially sink a ship. And once the missiles are fired, the submarines need to return to Australia to restock before they can, weeks later, return to the conflict. Who in their right mind would spend $368 billion to deliver 36 bombs to a fight?
Well, so the Tomahawks don't have to carry conventional munitions.
Right. Oh, well, we're going to put nuclear weapons on them.
We could,
Yeah.
because once we've got the
'Cause that's what we want to
capability,
do.
once we've
Yes.
got the capability, we could
Yes, and that's what we would want to do.
possibly.
Engage in a nuclear war. To put it in
who knows what
perspective,
the
he
underlying
says-
strategy is?
He says here, to deliver 36 bombs to a fight, to put it in perspective, that's less than the payload of a single B-52 bomber. I mean, if we wanted to drop nuclear bombs, we could put them in a B-52 bomber, I guess. You know, Hiroshima, Nagasaki style.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to get one of those to China.
Yeah. It's proving at 368 billion to get 36 that might get, it's not that easy either. So this is the interesting part, dear listener, that we haven't explored before, is just the limited amount of sort of missile power that you get for your submarine as well. So they're great for knocking out ships that are coming to attack you, but their value in terms of landing bombs on China's mainland is limited.
Landing special forces, on the other hand, is another thing that's done from submarines.
Yeah, but that would be special forces rather than a...
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
You're not going to carry an army across the sea in that.
Yeah. Do we want special forces landing on the shores of China to start running around?
It depends.
But
You know,
what?
It depends.
What? We want to deliver special forces to mainland China?
No, I'm just saying, if you are involved in a scrap and that sort of stuff, then you could actually have to deploy special forces, and perhaps the best way to deploy them is off a submarine. I'm not actually advocating. I'm just saying that it could be a solution.
So
delivering special forces to a fight.
During the Falklands, they landed special forces in Argentina to provide advance warning of air attack. And so if there was a Taiwan war, it's possible that they'd want intelligence assets on mainland China giving advance warning of incoming strikes.
Do we need a nuclear-powered submarine to deliver the special forces?
If you need to
we could put them in any old slow-moving sub, couldn't we?
If you needed to get out of Australian waters and you need to get up to China, then yes, you would actually need a nuclear-powered submarine because they don't actually have to refuel.
Are we seriously saying this is a valuable contribution of a nuclear-powered submarine to deliver special forces to China?
I'm not saying it's a valuable contribution. I'm just simply putting out that, it could actually come back to be something that you could actually use them for. I'm not actually suggesting it's a good idea. I'm just saying that they could actually have a use.
Anyway, that's the latest on subs.
Mm-hmm.
You're up to speed, dear listener, on subs.
Underwater, possibly.
Essentially, Lord Don has done something there. He says, they could probably find an allied base closer to them. So they wouldn't necessarily have to restock in Australia. They could probably find an allied base closer to them.
Yeah.
Which is very true. They could probably just go down to the Philippines, pick up some more Tomahawk cruise missiles and return to the fight.
Yeah.
Or they could go back to Taiwan to pick up Tomahawk cruise missiles. I don't know.
And, while they're there, it's not like the Chinese would fire on them in the Philippine dock while they're getting reloaded. It wouldn't happen.
They could well do that. They could well do that. It all depends on whether or not the Philippines gets involved in the war. If the Philippines is a neutral country and that sort of stuff, then
if we're restocking, then they're involved.
Yeah, they could be.
Anyway, it's such an enormous amount of money being wasted on such a stupid deal, and this goddamn Labor government agreed to it within 24 hours of being told by ScoMo, and were proud of themselves for their bipartisan support of a Scott Morrison thought bubble.
It could be worse. They could have supported the stage 3 tax cuts.
Yeah. They did it just longer than 24 hours. Probably. Yes.
They did actually support the stage 3 tax cuts only because the coalition wouldn't actually split the bill. So they had to actually vote for the bill in its entirety, the whole lot. Stage 1, 2, and 3 tax cuts.
They could have said, when we come into power, we will get rid of them. But they didn't.
I agree. They should have done that, but they didn't because they tried to make themselves a small target.
Yep. Right. There was a review into alcohol in the Northern Territory, and Professor Marcia Langton has called for uniform alcohol restrictions across the Northern Territory to help reduce rates of domestic, family and sexual violence. So she says we need to restrict alcohol access across the entire Northern Territory. An absolutely necessary public health measure to reduce domestic violence. You have to have alcohol restrictions in place at all times, no exceptions. Not just in Aboriginal communities, otherwise grog runners will exploit the system. And she suggested a permit system could be implemented, which is already in place across some remote areas in the Northern Territory, allowing responsible drinkers to consume alcohol. Gentlemen, what do you think about a sort of blanket alcohol ban in the Northern Territory, except if you've got a permit and you're allowed to drink because you're responsible?
I'm
actually
I'm
okay with it.
No, I'm okay with it. I think I don't see a problem with us bringing in drinking restrictions for people. I know people will not appreciate it, but if you said it's a 2 drink a day, which is the safe drinking limit, If you're drinking more than that, and I don't know whether these will be transferable, whether you can build them up for a weekend. I would say the vast majority of people aren't going to hit that. The people that are going to get hit by that are alcoholics.
I think if you have the permit, you're probably just allowed to buy the drink for yourself and as much as you want. But
So if you're a problem drinker, your permit gets revoked?
looks like it.
Apparently so.
Okay. So
What are they going to do? Are they going to find out from the cops who the problem drinkers are they?
I don't know. If you get done for drunk and disorderly, you lose your permit. Perhaps I don't know how it works.
Are they going to put the health resources in place to deal with people who have a problem and are using alcohol to hide, mask, whatever the problems that they've got? Put the mental health services in place so these people don't turn to drink.
No,
Because all they're going to
of
do
course
is abuse other things,
yes.
and that's the
No,
problem.
no.
If you take alcohol away, all they're going to do is turn to other things to get drunk or to get high. Because generally people who do this are escaping something.
Yes,
Something
this is the
shitty
chasing
has
the
happened in their
screen.
life. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're interested in drug addiction, dear listener, read Just Chasing the Scream.
Yeah, there's some questions about how truthful he was in some of his interviews. But I think the premise is good if you just keep in mind that not everything you read may be factual.
So, anyway, that was Marcia Langton, and find out more detail about that and see what happens.
The other question is what happens, do you get grog smugglers just coming in from Queensland and WA instead?
Yes, how they police that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know. Yeah. United Nations resolutions. So, I think we spoke last week about the resolution that was proposed
For a ceasefire?
for a ceasefire, and Australia was one of the ones that abstained because the resolution didn't have enough words in it saying that Hamas were the bad guys. There wasn't enough context for it. There was another resolution demanding the end to sanctions against Cuba. And the vote was 187 to 2, demanding an end to sanctions by the United States against Cuba. Dear listener, 2 guesses on which countries voted against the resolution.
Well,
and one of them was the USA, because they're the guys implementing these sanctions.
Given that you're bringing it up, the other one must be Australia.
No,
Israel.
Israel. And there was one abstainer,
Extension, and that was Ukraine.
and that was Ukraine.
So the people who are beholden to the US for weapons.
Correct. 187 to 2, demanding the end to sanctions against Cuba. Voting against USA and Israel, abstaining the Ukraine. That tells you everything. There. Yeah.
Well, I don't blame Israel and Ukraine.
Because they're dirty Cubans. They don't need their...
No.
so bad. Right.
I don't blame them because they're in the middle of wars and they want ammunition. And if that's the price, then it's a small price.
Yes. Just a vote at the UN. Yep. Yeah. Right. This will be an interesting one, Scott. The Greens. So they will introduce an effective rent freeze across Brisbane by enacting massive land rates increases for any property investors who increase the rent. So if you put up the rent, we'll put up your rates, says Jonathan Shree, and it would run for 2 years, and it would require landlords to keep rents below the January 2023 levels. And if you don't, say if you increase the rental, then the rates will be 750% of the standard rates bill. So 7.5 times your normal rates bill if you put up the rent. So examples cited by the party include a hypothetical CBD unit with a $1,500 a year rates bill. A $50 a week rent increase would bring $26,000 a year in extra income, but would result in an extra $9,750 in additional land rates. So clearly, a landlord just wouldn't do it. Scott, what do you think of as a potential Greens voter in a council election in Brisbane? They saying freeze rents, otherwise 7.5 times the rates.
I don't vote for Brisbane councils or anything like that because I live in Mackay. It's one of those things. I just think that the Greens are actually desperately to try and get they're trying to get their rent freeze across and that type of thing. So they're actually targeting each of the elections and that type of thing that they're going for. Now, does Councillor Shree, what's his name, Shree, have any chance of winning? Probably not. So he can go out, he can say all this sort of crap now and that sort of thing, and he won't actually have to deliver on it. It's one of those things. I just think to myself that the whole lot is it's a lot of puff and bluster more than anything else. Do I actually agree with it? No, I don't. It's one of those things. A rents increase and that type of thing, you can't actually only blame a landlord for increasing rent. Rent is a cost of renting a place, and that is determined by the market more so than anyone else. Now, I know they can say that oh, well, they're the ones that are increasing the rent, which they are. I've got no doubt about that. But you can't actually then come down and clobber them by saying, well, you get 750% of the rates. And have they actually say anywhere there that they were going to, if it was an increase of rent on 2023 prices, was it, or 2022 prices, or 2020 prices?
Freezing it at January 2023 levels.
For how long? 2 years, was it? Yeah, I'm not convinced of it.
What we've got is a federal level of government that has provided tax incentives for property investors. And now we've got a different level of government trying to reverse those incentives with sort of penalties to disincentivise property investment. So it's a Band-Aid solution to other issues. Is one way of looking at it.
It is. So there's three inputs, I would say, to your cost of a rental. One is the cost of the mortgage that's underlying it. One is the cost of the maintenance of the unit, and one is profit. And the problem is, at the moment, the profit is a larger component of the cost of the rental than the other two. So you need to be able to allow landlords to service their mortgage and to provide adequate maintenance, because otherwise what will happen is you'll end up with a load of slumlords. So how do you... It's less around the first two costs, because controlling the overall cost is a blunt tool. It's really the profits that you need to be looking at, and whether these people are paying off their mortgages more quickly than expected, or whatever it is.
What do you guys think previously of other moves by local councils to either increase rates if the property was vacant or increase rates if it was an Airbnb situation?
I think that's fine.
If the property is vacant most of the time, or because is it going to be affecting people that got weekenders or not?
I I
Because
think
your place down the coast would be considered to be vacant, wouldn't it, for most of the time?
use 3 days a week. So
Okay, 3 days a week, then you probably
I don't
you
know.
probably get away with that. So it's one of those things. So that would fall under my definition of a weekender. So if weekenders were subject to an increase in rates, then I'd be opposed to that. Do I really have a problem with Airbnbs and that sort of stuff? Not really. It's
Well,
But for some communities, for example, their teachers, their essential service people were finding it really difficult to rent in the community because there was no long-term rentals available. It was all Airbnb'd.
But also weekenders. If you were a teacher in Coolangatta, how easy is it to get a unit that is a reasonable travelling distance because of all of the Brisbane people who have a weekender down there?
I know on the Sunshine Coast it's been very difficult for teachers.
Yep.
Say you're a young graduate teacher trying to find a rental on the Sunshine Coast. I know it's been very
virtually
difficult.
impossible.
But how many of those are Airbnb and weekenders, and how many of those are just retirees from Melbourne and Sydney who've come up for the better life?
I don't know. I can understand the social desire of the council to say we need to be massaging our property mix here so our essential people can live here. And if this is the only tool we've got, it's the only tool we've got. Like, I sort of get it from that point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a society is poorer if you don't have a mix of people living in an area, if your essential workers have to travel large distances, that financially impacts them because they then have to pay travel costs and they lose time away from family just in the commute. So I think it makes sense to have a varied demographic inside an area. And if you have to do it by blunt instruments like rates increases, it's probably not the best answer, but how else do you do it?
Anyway, when it comes to Councillor Shree and the Brisbane City Council and whacking up rates 7.5 times the normal rate, if you've increased the rent, really, it's in that situation, you're just trying to do a rent freeze, which is more a state government or a federal government issue. But it'll be interesting to see how things pan out over the next elections. There's a lot of grief in the young community over rent and property prices, and there'll be a lot of sympathy for the Greens' position, where they're at least talking about these things.
Landon's just made a comment.
Oh, has he? Profits on rentals are not as amazing as many people think they are. They are great if you own the property for 20 or 30 years, but that's not every landlord's position. That would be true. When people have paid top dollar for a rental, they might have paid on the basis that they either needed an Airbnb style of income
Return.
or yep.
It's one of those things. Like if they had to buy it and that sort of stuff, they bought it with borrowed money. They had to spend 80% of that would be loaned, which they'd be getting charged interest on and everything else. So
this is our problem. It's really hard to wind back this situation of when we've reached overinflated property levels.
Oh yeah,
really
I agree.
hard to wind it back now.
And that is why I was very. That's why I was taking Liam to task over that, because if you actually engineer a decline in value of property, then you end up engineering a failure in our economy.
But to the Greens' credit, federally, they were looking at phasing. If you recall, the changes to tax laws was quite clever, really, and I'm in agreement with it. It was about phasing out that 50% capital gains and phasing out some of the tax deductions over time. So that was clever by the Greens federally.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So-
It's one of those things. Are they going to replace that? Are they going to replace that with the old way of calculating capital gains tax or not?
I can't
Or were they
remember
just
what it
going
was,
to do
Scott.
it? Or were they just going to phase it down so you end up paying 100% of the profit on tax?
Yes, I think the 50% discount was phased out over 5 to 10 years, whatever it was. So,
So was that replaced? Was that then replaced with the old system of calculating capital gains or not?
I can't recall.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Yeah.
Talking
Anyway,
of Airbnb, by the way, we rented a place in Manchester last week. The cost was £148, but then include on top of that was a £60 cleaning fee and a £32 service fee. So it went from £150 to £240.
Is that a night, is it?
yeah.
So it's just, I wonder about Airbnb and what profits people are making.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you go, oh, this is the rental price, and then suddenly the rental price isn't the cost you pay.
Yes. There we go. James in the chat room says, too many people are using housing as an investment. That is what the stock market is for. Couldn't agree with you more, James. Just have to change the rules. Right. Well, I reckon that's enough, gentlemen. Keep some of these topics for next week. Particularly gender pay gap, etc. That'll do us. So
Gender
what
pay
else we
gap
got?
doesn't exist.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about that next week. Are you around, Joe? You going to be near an internet connection and a computer next week?
I believe I am. I'm travelling back down to Devon on Sunday. So, yeah, I should be around Tuesday morning, my time.
Right. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay. You'll have finished your dinner before.
Well, I finished my dinner, and the reason why I had to go is because with my MS, one of the holes in my brain is in the part that controls your swallowing, and I was trying to eat too quickly, and I've got some food stuck in my throat, so I had to go away and
There you go.
vomit it up. So it wasn't very pleasant. Anyway,
I'm glad we muted you.
yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Right, dear listener. Thanks for joining. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Talk to you then. Bye for now.
And it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from him.